Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the Town of Los Gatos Planning Commission meeting of October 13th. Just by way of background, the Planning Commission is a group of volunteers in town appointed by the Town Council to make land use decisions. We make our decisions based on existing policies and ordinances in the town, and we do not have certain discretions that the Town Council does with regard to policy. With that, I'd ask you to check your cell phones. That includes commissioners up here because they do interfere with the microphones. So if you wouldn't mind silencing your cell phones before we get started, that would be great. And let's start with a roll call.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Here.
Commissioner Erickson.
Here.
Commissioner Jensen.
Here.
Commissioner Machici.
Here.
Commissioner Talasfor.
Here.
Commissioner Sayoc.
Here.
Chair Bourgeois.
Here. Thank you. Would everyone please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The first item on tonight's agenda is approval of the minutes of our meeting of September 22nd. Everyone should have received a draft of those minutes. Do I have any changes, additions, or a motion? Commissioner Erickson.
I would move to adopt the minutes as distributed for the meeting of September 22nd.
So moved. Any second?
Second.
Commissioner Jensen. Any other comments or changes? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Minutes pass unanimously. Next is written communications. We did have a desk item for item number 1, so if folks at some point need an extra minute to look through those, please give me a wave. But do we have any other written communications? And that's it. And we have no requested continuances tonight, so that leads us to subcommittee reports. Each of the members of the Planning Commission serve on various subcommittees, and at this time we usually give a summary of what has been happening at those subcommittees. Do we have any updates? Commissioner Jensen?
The General Planning Committee met, I don't recall the date now, special date, September 29th, for a final review of the housing element. And that is going before the Town Council on Monday, October 18th. But the General Plan Committee did meet and discuss last-minute issues and possible questions, and a revised housing element has come out, and I think it's been posted on the website, and it's scheduled for Monday in front of the Town Council.
And correct me if I'm wrong, is there a joint study session with the Planning Commission on that?
That's correct.
And what's the date? Is that this coming Monday?
Monday. Mm-hmm.
Monday.
October 18th.
October 18th. Okay.
Well, the Town Council meeting starts at 7. There's a guesstimate that they'll get to the housing element around 7:30, but again, that's a guesstimate.
Great. No other subcommittee meetings since we last met. Okay, and that brings us to verbal communications. This is the point in the meeting where members of the public can address the commission on items that are not on tonight's agenda. You're welcome to speak to us on any issue that's on your mind. I have no cards currently. If people do wish to speak to an item not on the agenda or on the agenda, please fill out one of these cards in the seats and pass it to staff either on our right or left here. Does anyone wish to speak during verbal communications? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the consent calendar, which is empty. So that brings us to our continued public hearings. And that is item number 1, 18 Palm Avenue, which is an architecture and site application, S-10-11. And Ms. Davis, can we get a staff report?
Good evening. The desk item that you have includes 2 emails that came in from the representative of the trust for 21 Palm Avenue, which is the property across the street from the project site. And you also have some front and elevations and site plans, and those are from the originally approved project and the plans that were considered at the last Planning Commission meeting, along with the elevation and site plan for the current proposal. There's also a letter of support from a neighbor at 8 Palm Avenue. Just as some background, the property is located on the east side of Palm Avenue, 1 lot south of Hernandez Avenue. There is currently a pre-1941 residence, a carport, and several sheds on the property. They're all at the rear portion of the property. And this is the largest parcel on Palm Avenue at 16,000 square feet. The DRC approved the plans on June 15th, and that decision was appealed and came to the commission in August. The Planning Commission continued to this agenda and asked the applicant to consider several things, including possibly removing the porte cochere from the side of the residence, consider accessing the garage from the alleyway rather than Palm, adding some articulation to the front facade, and looking at the windows and trying to make those more in kind with the windows on other homes on the street. The Planning Commission minutes were attached for your information to the staff report. One thing that came up at the last meeting that wasn't specifically discussed because of advice from staff was the wildland urban interface and restrictions on exterior materials. There was some mention of whether the siding could be wood on this house, and at that time staff advised that the exterior of the residence is required to be a non-combustible material. We do have a list of approved materials, and there's more and more things coming on, becoming available and getting approved by the State Fire Marshal's office. The building official did some further research for me, and he said he found out that there are some real wood products that would have been approved for use in the wildland urban interface. So that is a possibility, and I believe the applicant is amenable to using wood siding on the side on the house, even though it is shown to be a non-combustible synthetic material right now. The staff report has details which I don't need to get into, but the applicant did resubmit revised plans after meeting with the appellant and another neighbor that has a design background. The appellant and other neighbor, Ren Pacheco, met with Mr. Osborne and the architect on several occasions. They revised plans and submitted those for your consideration, and I think I'll let them get into the details of what they've accomplished, and I'm here to answer any questions you might have.
Do we have any questions of staff at this time? Okay, seeing none, we're going to go ahead and start the public hearing. Since this is a continued public hearing of an appeal, we're going to follow the same process we did for the appeal. We're going to hear from the appellant first, then the applicant, then the public, then the applicant again, and the appellant will have the final word. So I don't have a card, but I see the appellant coming to the microphone now.
I also have some.
So you want to wait till we get the overhead set up before you start?
I have several other handouts that I don't have copies of that I would also like to send around. One is from Jeff Schrager, which was forwarded to me with, I'll just send it around. It has both letter from Jeremy and some letters attached. I also have the August 15th, 25th letter that was sent by email that was sent by Jeff Schrager. Yeah,
we just have one copy, so take a look and pass it down, and I'm sure we'll get into the contents.
I have the photo that was attached to Jeff Schrager's letter. It's the last letter on your desk item. Your staff report on the desk item indicates that he only commented on procedure. The last letter also comments on the project itself.
Could I just say, I don't know how we're going to do this unless we make copies now, because there are multiple pages, which we're going to pass it down because there's one copy. somebody's not going to be hearing what you
I
say.
agree with you.
Right. So let's just pass it down and get it to staff so they can do that. And if we need to take a recess to read them before we deliberate, we can do that.
Then I have one other comment on the desk item, and then I'll hopefully have time left to talk about what I was wanted to talk about. The drawings that you have in the desk item, they are not identified as to who they came from. I would also like to comment that the March 2010 original submittal is the original submittal, not a copy of what was actually approved at DRC. DRC's had the carport cut down to 1, and it had fenestration on most of the windows. Additionally, I'd like to comment that the whole file that you got the last time was not that was stamped approved by the DRC. On your site plan on this submittal, the large oak tree opposite the arbor has been deleted or left out. Okay. Okay, you know the direction that you gave, and my understanding of it was that it was to remove the carport, alley access, articulate the front, push back part of the first story, and make the windows more compatible with the predominant style in the neighborhood. And all of those relate to neighborhood compatibility and predominant neighborhood pattern. What you see on the board here is the bottom picture is what was worked out during our 2 meetings with the applicant and the architect. The one above is what was submitted. Many of the changes that worked towards improving this project were removed. I think all of the changes that were discussed at the meetings were improvements in the project, and I think the change in the porch roof and the carport location and style are pretty important. That the carport change has remained. The question is whether the Planning Commission's direction to remove the carport meant removing the porte-cochere that was integrated into the architecture, or this is what they had in mind. Basically, after that meeting, I think is where my time is almost up. I spent it all on correcting things from the report. I want to say, I'm going to go back and say just real fast that I think that the carport was addressed in the bottom one. The windows were addressed in the bottom one. We improved the verticality. I think what wasn't addressed was the driveway access, and that has to do with, it's tied in with the garage, the driveway, and the trees. And I want you to look at the problem with the trees and the driveway and the arborist report. If I can explain that, please.
Any questions? I actually would like you to explain what you mean by the resolution between the driveway and the trees.
Okay. We still have a bypass driveway because the driveway still goes all the way to the back. The carport still is counted as a required parking space, so there has to be access to the 3 garage bays. The bypass on the plan is indicated as, if I read it, I think it says grass block or something of that sort. It comes, from my reduced copy, it looks like it comes within a foot or 2 of the oak tree. The arborist's report indicates that in the landscape guidelines that turf should not be under the canopy of an oak tree, that any vegetation that's planted under an oak tree should be highly drought resistant, that any vegetation should be at least 5 feet from the oak tree, and I'm losing the fourth one, but you get the idea. In addition, it seems to me that the request to remove the kitchen from the guest house is really driving all of this, because that means they have to have 4 spaces instead of 2. The avocado tree was not indicated as diseased or declining by the arborist, and he did not recommend approval. He said that seemingly it is consistent with the tree ordinance, without giving true reason other than it might drop fruit and it was in the way of the project. So what I'm saying, I guess, is that I think the driveway and the alley access are still major problems, and that having access from the alley would eliminate a lot of hardscape, would allow the avocado tree to survive, and the driveway bypass, to me, is a problem, both from being consistent with the conditions of the project.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions for the appellant? Seeing none, I have another question. Reading through the correspondence we got in the addendum, it looked like there was a little disagreement as to whether or not consensus had been reached at one of these design meetings.
Yeah, it was.
And I'm going to ask the applicant the same question, but I want to get your thoughts and opinions on the outcome of that meeting and whether or not there was consensus.
Okay. Yeah, that's the $100 million question, I guess. We did have very good meetings. We did make progress. At the end of the second meeting, I was asked to sign off and say I approve the project. My response was that while I thought we had made major progress, I thought there were still some issues that the Commission had raised that had not been adequately addressed. And in addition, my main reason was that it's not in my purview to approve or disapprove the project, or to say that it met or didn't meet your direction. That's your decision. It was after that the applicant decided to change it back to very little progress. The progress had been made. We all agreed that the changes were good, and I guess that's all I have to say about it.
Thank you. Any other questions? Commissioner Talasfore?
Yeah, I'm not clear exactly on what the progress was and then what it went back to.
The progress was the bottom photo,
Okay?
and some things that are on the site plan with reference to the garage and the driveway, which I discussed the driveway and a little bit the garage, but the garage design was also changed. We just as sort of as we were looking at it, we threw out, well, gee, the garage architecture doesn't match the architecture of the house. It matched the architecture of the previous original 2007 approval, but it didn't match the current one. So there was a discussion about whether it made more sense for the architecture of the garage, which was a new structure, and the house, which was a new structure, to match, rather than it match the existing old structure. And the thought was that clearly differentiated it from the more historic building. There was something else I wanted to say, but it slipped.
Commissioner Talasfore, did that answer your question?
That does. Thank you.
Commissioner Erickson?
Thank you for your comments, Ms. Quintana. I guess I appreciate the short amount of time that you've had to try to cover a lot of material, and so it would be very helpful to me if you could take a moment, collect your thoughts, and be very clear so that I would understand what the specific issues are that you think are not resolved or resolved to your satisfaction, what those are very clearly, 1, 2, 3, 4, how many ever there are, and what you think the unresolved part of the issue is.
Okay, let me start off.
You know, because at least my sense is we've been kind of, and I'm not being critical, I mean, it's you had a very short period of time and what seems to be a very complex issue, so it'd be very helpful
Yes,
if you could summarize 1, 2, 3, 4,
I did not
5.
intend to spend as much time dealing with additional information, which I really do think is necessary for you to read.
Yes, can I say one thing for you? I don't want you to really go back through an explanation of each item. I want to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, what those things are, what the unresolved specific issue is.
Based on what was submitted or what was came out of the second meeting we had?
Like what we have in front of us tonight is, so we have something in front of us tonight that we can't consider. I don't believe that we can't consider those things that may have been talked about at a meeting that was between you and neighbors, or because we'd be speculating about what went on. So we have specific things in front of us tonight. So what are the unresolved issues, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, how many of there are, and what the unresolved issue is with that particular thing?
First of all, I'm going to repeat, it's not a question of resolving it to my satisfaction. It's a question to your satisfaction. However, if you ask me what I think, I will tell you that, I'm going to take this off so I can look, that the submittal, the applicant's modification that was submitted on the 24th does not have many of the features of that made the, see, I can't, it's hard to do it without referring to what's down there, but okay. The, doesn't project as much verticality. Now, that's up to you whether you think that your conditions of, you asked that there be more articulation and setting back of the mass. I don't think that's been done. I think that improvement has been made in the central portion where the proportion of the doorway lights and the dormer above it have been changed to emphasize that section of the house to make it seem a little more vertical. That included raising the height of the dormer and putting some articulation around the doorway. But it doesn't, in my opinion, and this is my opinion, it doesn't meet the objective of further articulating the front elevation or moving any of the mass back. So my thoughts on this is the house still is very prominent on the street. The pine tree is removed, which makes the house very visible. And yes, when you remove such a big tree, you are going to have some great changes in the visibility or the character of the street. But seems to me that one of the mitigations that needs to be made is to design the house to try and compensate a little bit for that. Yes, the oak trees will grow in. I hope I'm alive by the time they do. Alley access. You've already heard my opinion on alley access. I think there are alternatives, like were suggested. Alley access from the back, Palm Avenue access to the carport, nothing in between, or alley access from the back, a drive-through that can go up to the carport. I understand Jeremy feels that would create more grading. In fact, there isn't that much grading on this site. It's a total of 5 cubic yards difference. The actual cut and fill total is more like 500 cubic yards, but the grading wouldn't be the driving factor in being able to do that. It's just probably not that great. The windows, I think I talked about them before. What this design did, okay, let me back up a minute. I'm sorry I'm not answering it as concisely as you wanted me to, but it's hard to do that. I took the residential design guidelines worksheet and went out on my street and looked at them and wrote down numbers, and I copied down all the things that had 3 or more, like it says. And what I found was that while there are eyebrow dormers, I think 1 or 2, they're very small on the block, is on one house. There is one additional house that has an oval window, and there are houses that have dormers. But most of all of the houses that have dormers do not have 3 dormers in front, 3 dormers in back, and 2 on each side. They have maybe at max 2 in the front and scattered around. It's not consistent. So what I think they've done is they've taken things that are in the immediate neighborhood but not the predominant pattern, and then they've used them as the basis or prominent feature of the house. One other thing. The landscaping on the front corner, southwest. I think I said at the last meeting that I didn't think that hedges there were appropriate, and I withdrew any request that they be placed there. They do not seem to be consistent with the less formal landscaping either of the site itself or the block itself.
Great, thank you very much.
Great. Any other questions of the appellant? Okay,
I do have one more thing that I would like you to consider, because I'm not sure about it.
Is this in continuation of your answer to Commissioner Erickson's question, or?
Sort of.
All right, I'll allow it. Quickly, please.
The new plans show a fence going all the way across the front of the property. It is only 3 feet high, but our neighborhood doesn't have very many fences in the front of the property. There's one that has a fence around the front yard, and there's one that has a fence, low fence, across the driveway set way, way back. This has the fence going all the way across the front, including the driveway, at the pretty close or at the property line. And I just would like you to consider that as well.
Great. Thank you. Okay, seeing no other questions, I'm going to call the applicant up. I have 3 cards from folks representing the applicant. All of you can speak, but you're going to be sharing time. So I have Jeremy Osborne, who I assume is going to be the primary speaker, and if the others wish to come up to support,
correct.
let us know.
I'll speak first, and then I'll call them up afterwards, if that's okay.
Can I just have some clarification? Should this person have the same time the appellant had?
Yes.
Okay, well, which was not 3 minutes or 5 minutes, if I'm correct. So, well, I mean, it went on and on and on.
Right, and we'll give them an opportunity to.
Thank you.
Sorry, I just need to find one page, and then I'll begin. There we go. Good evening. My name is Jeremy Osborne. I live at 1324 Dale Avenue in San Jose, 95125. I am a licensed contractor and real estate broker. I work primarily on residential new construction projects like this one, as well as remodels and additions. I mentioned those credentials as I did last time because I am also, of course, a son in this case. The owners of this property are Mom and Dad back there. Wave real fast. which I'll refer to as David and Georgia from here on out. David and Georgia have lived in Los Gatos since 1994. Absolutely love living in this town and all their friends here. And for over 4 years, we have searched to find an ideal location closer to downtown with an opportunity for them to build a new construction home like the project we're proposing. And we feel like we found the ideal lot at 18 Palm. So when we acquired it in June 2009, we spent over 9 months designing the home, leaving no stone unturned, in order to achieve a design that they will want to live in for the rest of their lives, and that does fit in with the neighborhood. You have before you a very detailed account of what has brought us to this point tonight, so I'll spend my time here focusing on the decision by the Planning Commission on August 25th and our efforts since that evening. At the August 25th meeting, the Commission voted to continue the appeal with several recommendations, address the front facade's articulation, consider grids on the windows, consider redesigning the porte cochere element on the side of the house, consider alley access for the garage, and of course work with the appellant on these design considerations. We listened to your comments that evening, believe me, and I have worked tirelessly along with Gene Solano from International Design Group, which is the architect for this project, to achieve a reasonable redesign that addresses the Commission's recommendations. And we tried to work with the appellant in order to reach this goal as well. I have made every attempt, I want to make it clear, beginning with our original submittal in March, to have an open line of communication with any and all interested parties. All reasonable suggestions have been considered and incorporated at this point. But there does have to be a balance. There has to be a fairness. Every change at this point, I beg you to understand, represents a major concession on David and George's behalf, for this will be their future home. They need to live in this home and love it. So the lot at 18 Palm has sat undeveloped for several years now. The previous owner struggled with the same exact issues and opposition that our project faces, and ultimately they abandoned their dream to build at this location out of frustration with the process and disappointment with the final design. This process continues to exhaust the time and resources of numerous parties involved and frustrate the majority of 18 Palm Avenue's neighbors, whom have no concerns with the project's design, but are growing increasingly frustrated with the dilapidated state of the lot as our project continues to face roadblocks. So tonight I just say it's time to move this project forward. I asked the Commission to evaluate the submitted redesign, consider the numerous concessions we've made and significant design revisions we've made, and we've tried to find a reasonable solution. At this point we have really exhausted our time and efforts in redesigning a home that addresses the appellant's demands and the Commission's suggestions, but more importantly still looks and feels like a home that David and Georgia want to own and build and live in. The project meets or exceeds all planning, building, and engineering requirements. The project was reviewed by the town's consulting architect for its compatibility with the surrounding neighborhood and with the town's residential design guidelines, which he helped author, and received his independent qualified approval. With the Commission's action for approval tonight, we know this home will make a tremendous contribution to the neighborhood in the very near future. And if I have a little bit of time left, I would like to just respond to a couple of the items that the appellant mentioned. The oak tree is still there on the plans. I believe the canopy detail might have been removed just for space constraints. The avocado tree, if you do have any concerns, I've got photos, I can talk about that. You can ask me if it is a concern, I can talk about it. And then, the alley access has been pretty well covered in our submitted documents. I'm more than happy to answer questions on that as well. And then as far as the residential design guideline worksheet that the appellant mentioned, she worked through on the street. I just want to point out that, of course, the consulting architect should have done so as well. I'm sure he did. Again, he is the author of the residential design, or one of the authors of the residential design guidelines. He's a trusted expert on this issue and has been since 2003.
Okay, thank you. Before I see if any of the other commissioners have any questions, I'd like to give you the opportunity to answer the same question I asked the appellant about the outcome of the meeting where there was some confusion about whether consensus was reached.
Right.
So I'd like to get your take on that meeting and the outcome.
Sure. Yes, a consensus was reached. That was the goal of the meetings. There were 2 3.5-hour long meetings. It was not a fun process, but we did work civilly, I would say, in order to achieve the goal. We had a couple of lingering issues at the end of the first meeting. We reconvened in order to resolve those issues, and at the end of it, we did. There are numerous major concessions that we made along the way in order to get to that point, and we were willing to make those concessions if we were able to come into this meeting tonight with everyone on the same page. And that was the agreement that we reached that night. 4 or 5 days later, obviously that all changed, and if that was the case, of course, we were decided to go back and evaluate some of those decisions. And of course, because it was not an easy process, and we certainly had opinions. I'll comment on, for example, the arch windows. We feel that does increase the articulation. That's the architect's, in my opinion, and the owner's opinion. We feel that it adds to the articulation of the home, and it was approved by the consulting architect as well.
And so just to be clear, the design at the bottom was the design that the alleged consensus was reached on?
Sure. I'll probably hand the design issue specifically over to June Solano here, just in case.
Okay, yeah, if you could introduce yourself with your name and address at the mic and address that question, that'd be great.
Good evening, June Ciliano, architect for the Osborne Residence, 721 Lighthouse Avenue, Pacific Grove. I have a presentation, but to specifically address Chairman Bourgeois' comment regarding the consensus, I want to show you what was submitted and what was originally agreed to.
Okay, and you can take the microphone out of the thing and take it with you if you want.
The top rendering is what I presented to Lee and Len at our meeting with Jeremy. And the bottom rendering shows what was submitted to the planning department. So I just want to point out that the overall intent of that meeting has been addressed and resolved. I invite the commissioners to see if there's any major changes that was perceived with regards to what was agreed at the meeting, with the last meeting with Lee and Len, pointing out the trellis arbor right here, and the way we conceive the trellis arbor. The intent there is to create a trellis arbor that allows plants to grow around it, so to soften the view from Palm Avenue. The addition of arches on the top dormer was also a design consideration, where we felt that having the arch top, it is complementary to the existing homes in the neighborhood. It does articulate verticality. So in terms of mass and bulk, I don't see any, as an architect who originally designed the first rendering on top and the bottom rendering, I don't see any difference in terms of mass and bulk and articulation. We did provided, which I agreed with Lee, adding mullions and mountain bars to the windows, adding surround around the entry, and lowering the plinth of the columns. Those are, I think, major design elements that has been submitted and presented to the appellant. The other major thing that we've done, and I don't look at this as a concession, it's more of a design feature, is reducing the eave lines at that upper level and the main level. Did I address your...
Thank you. Yeah, that was great.
Thank you.
Commissioner Sayoc.
Thank you for those comments. Besides the window shape of your top floor, were there other changes that you changed to make it more your individual style from what was agreed upon in the top picture? I do notice when you look at that top picture and the one that was right above it, it looked like the beams of the porch the width has widened, but looking at the picture that you have below, it doesn't appear so. So if you could just specifically list out some of the changes that you made from the top picture and from the bottom picture.
I mentioned the eave lines. That's been reduced from 13 inches to 18 inches. We put arch tops on the dormer windows other than the main entry dormer. And that dormer window, the arch top, is consistent around the house. It's not just the facade. If I may show the other elevations. The south elevation, again, is consistent. Wherever we have that dormer, we did provide the same arch top. And then that is also consistent in both the east and north elevation of the house. So the arch top is not meant to just address the facade. The way we look at it is the overall architecture. At the end of the day, when you look at one side of the house and look at the other side, does it look like it's the same house? So the intent is wherever we apply the dormer technique and the splayed wall, it's consistent around the house. And just to show you that really we're complementing the neighborhood, I have some pictures of homes on Palm Avenue that has arch tops or curved elements, if I may do that. Or should I wait until?
Actually, at least for my benefit, that answered my question. So I'm satisfied with the actual window, your justification for that. Were there any other specific changes, like changing the mass of the bottom floor, how much was set back on the top floor? Those are more of the changes that I'm looking for.
We have, there's a, let me get my pen here. Part of the changes that we have agreed to and which occurs in both design is the lowering of the plinth. This is the plinth. It's a stone plinth carrying the two wood columns. So that's consistent on both projects or both designs. And the eave line, the arbor has not changed. So I'm trying to grasp what the difference is really between my original design and the revisions that was originally submitted. The arch top windows, I would say, is the major element. We introduced wood trim around the entry, so that's consistent with the resubmitted plans.
Okay, that answers my question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Talasfor.
Not so sure it answers mine, though, about the articulation on that second floor with the dormer windows. So in this articulation, to reduce the mass or the scale, and did you move any of the top roof line back or any of that wall back? Or are all of those dormers on the same plane?
Thank you. I missed that. Yes, we did move the dormers. The center dormer has been protruded further than the side dormers.
So you moved it forward,
Yes.
not back? Okay,
Not
so you
backward.
moved that forward. And what happened to the side dormers?
It got pushed back. So we created
What's it, like how much?
6 inches.
6 inches?
Yeah. Yes. Also keep in mind,
Thank you.
I'm
That's
sorry.
good. Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant at this time? Commissioner O'Donnell.
I just wanted to hear what you wanted to say, because I was following that, and I found it helpful, because you wanted to further explain something, and I'd kind of like to know what it was.
I just want to point out that the second-story roof, the second-story portion of the proposed residence and the dormers are completely subservient to the main level roof. By doing so, you create articulation and shadow line that breaks up mass and bulk. And I think I did show it on this rendering, that dark shaded portion represents a deeper shadow line where the main level porch is, versus not so deep shadow line where the eve line of the upper floor is. So by doing so, you're breaking mass and bulk. And also, to add to Commissioner Talispor's question, we did raise the ridge line of the center dormer as well. So that's something I missed. We did raise it high to give it that vertical feel to it.
Yep, Commissioner O'Donnell.
How much did you raise it?
To the maximum height to match the main reach of the house. So probably another 16, 18 inches from what we have originally submitted.
Commissioner Talispor?
Are they, let me just ask a question of
Yes,
procedure.
they will be coming back after
They'll be coming
public,
back?
yes.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no further questions at this time, thank you. We're going to take public comment now, and you'll have a chance to come back up and rebut anything you hear at that time. So I have 2 speaker cards here. If anyone, there's a lot of folks in the audience, if anyone wishes to speak, I need a card. The first speaker from the public we have is Ducky Grable.
I live at 315 Pennsylvania Avenue. I have never met the Osbornes. When I heard this project was being proposed and I live around the corner, I wanted to investigate to see what the design was. I just wanted to come tonight to let you know that after examining the architectural plans, that as a neighbor and right around the corner, I feel this is a beautiful home design that I think will fit in on the lot and will fit in the neighborhood. I had heard through the neighborhood that there were some concerns about the driveway, and you know, I don't know if that's been resolved or not, but with the width of the driveway and the size of the lot, I was just wanting to voice my opinion that I think that the fact that the driveway's been there forever, that it makes perfect sense that they have the driveway from Palm Avenue. And I felt strongly about coming here and just letting you know that I think it's a beautiful design, and I think it will make a major contribution to the neighborhood. And I just want to caution you to, knowing the projects that have been proposed on this site in the past and the frustrations that people have felt, that just to caution you to not take into consideration neighbors' personal design agenda when it comes to the point where it diminishes the homeowner's property rights.
Thank you for coming down and giving us your opinions. Anyone have any questions for Ms. Grable? Thank you very much. The next speaker we have is Leonard Pacheco.
Does everyone have one of these? I mean, I made extra copies so you can have them in front of you. Can we leave that there? It's perfect. Leonard Pacheco, 50 Hernandez Avenue. I live a plot away from the proposed development. There's good news that there is an alternative to the hardy board cementitious siding. That's very good news to me because it fits in with the design guidelines regarding materials. So that was a plus. One item, Lee has covered most of the items that you see up here. The one item that's not been discussed in the revised plan that we worked on after 6 or so hours of meetings was in the lower drawing. The porch has been clipped, and one of the reasons for that was to reduce the verticality. So now what you see is a very horizontal line where the existing porch wraps around. If that were brought in and the architect came up with the idea of putting trellis at the corners that would match
the arbor that was adjacent to the house. So we felt that was a pretty good design solution that brought the horizontal aspect of the facade in. So that was one thing that was not discussed tonight. I kind of disagree with the arched window concept. It works really well over the main entryway. It relates to the entryway, which is arched. If you start having clip or flattened arches all over, it starts to get loopy-loop. So if it works in the front, over the door, perfect. If it works in the rear, over the entryway, perfect. It doesn't need to be all over the upper floor. Those could be rectangular windows, which would probably make more sense at the eave line. So with those comments, I thought the meetings that we had with the architect and the applicant were very cordial and very productive. So I was surprised to see a return to what looks like the original design. So was all of our work, worthless? That's it.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for Mr. Pacheco? Commissioner Telesfor.
Thank you for coming down here and also being part of that group that worked with everyone. You commented on the materials, and I did have a question about the siding, so thank you for that. The other thing is, it's the articulation of the second floor in the submitted drawing compared to the one below. So they looked a little, I'm thinking that the windows have made a significant difference in that articulation, or what am I seeing? What's the difference?
Which drawing are you referring to?
Option A is the one that's been
as submitted.
And then option B, is that the one?
That's the one that we worked on.
That you worked on together? Okay. So there's something very different about them, but.
The dormers? Oh.
Yeah, and
the other thing we eliminated was the flare at the roof line. In order to get the verticality going, you don't want to disrupt it with the curves. You want to keep the thing going up straight and then stopping it at the peak of the dormer. So that's one thing that has not been changed on the new plan that we had tentatively agreed on. So the clipping of the porch, the treatment of the dormers, except for the central dormer. The other thing that clipping the porch would bring in the columns closer in to add more verticality.
Okay.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it did. Thank you very much.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
I'm trying to understand you spent 6 hours, which is a lot of time for all of you, and that's wonderful that you did that. It's interesting because we're not supposed to design homes here. That's why we have the town architect. But forgetting that, which we often do, what I also heard from the applicant is that in trying to resolve this, it was like, okay, this is apparently what you folks want. Would you agree to this? And as I understand the testimony, at either that point or 4 days later, and I'm not sure which it was, at least one of you said, no, I won't agree to it for whatever reason. One reason was because that's not my job to agree with these things. The applicant says, I made these concessions because I was going to get agreement. I didn't get agreement. I didn't make these concessions. Do you have a different understanding of that last meeting?
It was not my appeal, number one. I entered the dialogue because of my design background. I felt that significant changes were made, and I'm referring to option B, the lower drawing, because I felt it addressed the comments that were raised by the Planning Commission. Jeremy called me after that meeting and asked me what I thought, and I said, well, I think we've made significant progress, but have you really addressed the articulation that I heard from the commission? And I have to say no, it hadn't. But what he had done, or what the architect had done, was an improvement over the original design that the DRC had approved. So I felt that we were really making progress in terms of design. Does that answer your question?
It does. I understand you to say you hadn't reached agreement.
We were very, very close.
So long as the applicant would ultimately meet the objections which you had not expressed at your last meeting, which you thought of upon reflection.
Right.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you. Is there any other member of the public that wishes to speak on this item? We have one more card coming forward. You could just go that way and state your name and address for the record.
My name is Ed Wynn. I live at 20 Peralta Avenue, which is about a block away from the subject we're talking about. I also happen to know the Osbornes. I redid my house, kind of going through less than this, about 5 years ago, and went through the same process with the Planning Commission, with the historical review and that kind of thing. And it went much smoother. We made some changes to make it consistent with the neighborhood as best we could. As I think the Osbornes have done in good faith, and we've gotten to the point where we're letting the neighbors design our house. And that doesn't seem right to me. If it's consistent, fits with the neighborhood, and by the way, I have looked at the plans and the lot, and it's very consistent, it's a beautiful house. So I would think it would be a shame if we let a neighbor design the house. We have qualified architects, the city has reviewed it. This seems kind of silly. The other thing is, it seems like it's a moving target. I mean, the Osbornes could be doing this for another year or so, from the sounds of it. They can't seem to get agreement. And I don't think that's fair to them either. So I think it'd be a great addition to the neighborhood, and I would fully support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wynn. Do we have any questions for the speaker? Seeing none, thank you. All right, I have no other cards. No one else is coming forward, so we're going to go back to the applicant. You will have time to rebut anything you've heard and make any closing statements.
I don't think I have too many items. I just do want to comment real quickly that Commissioner O'Donnell, I think your interpretation of kind of the procedure of events with our meetings is fairly accurate. There was an agreement reached, albeit very brief, and we were willing to get to that point if we were able to come into this meeting reaching a consensus, and this would have obviously been a much easier process if that were the case. That agreement did not stick. And so you have to understand again that this is David and George's home. All of the changes, all the design, elements that we're talking about fit within the guidelines. Absolutely fit within the guidelines. So they're all very reasonable changes. And again, we feel they do add to particularly the articulation and the verticality and some of the items that we've talked about. I'd like to, again, just talk about the alley access and the driveway bypass before we kind of get beyond the public comment section here and you guys start your deliberations. I want to just make sure that you have any questions that you have or lingering concerns. Make sure you please do ask me about that. We submitted a lot of information about that and gave you our reasons why we kept it the way we did. It's certainly a safety concern for Georgia and Dave. They would prefer to pull in from Palm Avenue. Historically, it has always been on Palm Avenue. There is an existing driveway. I have photos I can show you. There's a driveway there right now, and we're basically adding a couple curves to it, nothing more. And the grade is significant at the alley. It's 3 feet. It's not so much the export and the cut and fill as it is what you would have to do as far as cutting into the lot, moving the garage into the lot, and also just making that turn right in that corner. If you can see that black spot on the left right here, that's a fence with the neighbor's property. So backing out, pulling in would be tricky, even if you pull the garage in. It would be a tight spot regardless of what you do. you have anything to add?
I just want to respond to some of the comments, so I'll just go through it quickly. The driveway issue and the alleyway has been addressed. I want to address the driveway, existing driveway on Palm. We took a lot of effort to reconfigure the driveway to minimize the impact from Palm Avenue. As you can see, we curved the driveway, and we have landscape screening and berming to minimize that view. There was a question about this bypass. What it is it's a grass paver, and if I can show quickly how it's been done and been successful.
If you could wrap up after you show that, and I'm sure we'll have some follow-up questions for you.
That's what they call grass paver. It's a grid system. As you can see, it's a very low profile. So as far as the system impacting the root of the oak tree, I think it will be very minimal if there's any at all. Here's a finished product of a grass paver system. So as opposed to having a hard surface on the driveway, I think it will be more green friendly to have a grass paver than a hard surface. A green paver with has a permeable material to it.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Sayoc, you have a question?
Yes, if you could answer or give your thoughts and comments about the clipped porch that was in option B versus the extended porch that you have in your in what was submitted, and you know, your thoughts, your preferences, why what you submitted is what you have.
Yes, I believe Len mentioned that earlier. He's mentioning of this clip porch, and we have reevaluated the drawings because when this concept was done, it was a quick sketch, and I felt as an architect, it feels like there's ears being clipped. So from a three-dimensional perspective, all of a sudden you don't have the pure roof line. What you end up is the roof stop, and then this trellis in the corner starts, and it starts on each side of the house, at each end of the house. So from architectural purity standpoint, I think it's all of a sudden we're trying to make it look Disneyland, adding that clip porch. So I reconsidered the design concept, and that's why I took it off. I felt that the verticality is still addressed with the current submittal. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions for the applicant, Commissioner Jensen?
I'm going to do this out of an abundance of caution, and it's going to sound like a silly question, but I want to make absolutely sure. Here's this sheet, has a top and a bottom, and here's this sheet. The colored sheet, I'm assuming, is an artist's architecture rendition of the top of this sheet, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
And Commissioner Jensen, was there a page number for the color rendering that you showed?
I'm sorry, it's in our desk item, and it's part of Exhibit 25 of item number 1, desk item.
Great.
It's, I think, the very last page, sorry.
Thank you. I just wanted that for the record. Any other questions for the applicant? Commissioner Telesfor.
Since we were talking about windows before, and that was an issue or concern that the commission had, in looking at the, I don't know, how do I identify this?
That was the handout provided by Mr.
Leonard
Pacheco.
Right. There's, on B option, there are the rectangular windows with the lights, which was important to the commission, and it's also, I know that those are not predominant, but there's a lot of them on that street. It's sort of a characteristic of the streets. So I was just curious as to why, how strongly do you feel about not using those as compared to what you have? Because it looks like the use of the squared windows with the arched windows in the center, but the squared ones really build a nice, strong relationship between the first floor and the second floor. And that's how I read that. It really reinforces the, what the facade. So how would you?
Visiting Palm Avenue and looking at the other homes there, that whole street is eclectic. There's no particular style. What makes it unique is
We're
it's
looking at the
different.
windows.
Yeah,
I'm
I'll
speaking
get
about
there.
windows.
Yeah, I'll get there. But I want to show that the neighborhood have curb windows,
I know.
curb elements. So we're picking up the street and how it reads in the general context of architectural character. So having curb roofs, curb archways, curb porches. I guess what I'm saying is I feel that it's part of the feature of this house, what makes it unique, although it complements the neighborhood. So I felt that bringing back the arches does create articulation, it does give it architectural character.
Right, and you have that going on in the center, but I was speaking about the windows, not about other parts of architectural features that were porches on other houses. I'm talking about the windows specifically. I don't think we have an answer, but okay.
Well, maybe if I could clarify, I think what I heard him saying that he was taking the curved elements on other houses and incorporating and using
yes.
the window as,
I understood what he said.
okay,
Yeah.
okay.
My question was,
Well, then I'm not clear on your question then.
well, the question is, would there be such an objection for the squared windows as well as the rounded windows, using, as in this B option, because the windows are so predominant on the facade of this house. They offer the articulation, and they offer the uniqueness to the design. And they are, I just think that they really unify the first and the second floor. They integrate better. They give much more strength to it.
And well,
So-
give me 1 second. Where's the question there?
So the
I'm-
question is, I thought I said, would that be something you could possibly bring into your design at this point? Would you relook at including those windows as they are in this B option?
I guess the best answer I can give is we do feel, we looked at this, we moved on from our 6 hours of meetings where we did not reach a consensus. And we looked at the elements, and the arch windows are something that we all felt add to the verticality, and it's something that the owners want and like, and it
So
does
I
fit the
take that
design
as a no.
criteria.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
It is.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, I'll ask one last question. Is there any final bit of information that you think we need to make our decision that hasn't been covered? No. I think your partner behind you is. Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Anatoly Astritsov, and I'm a project manager on this project. And you might think it's irrelevant what I want to say, but it was an honor to join you for a Pledge of Allegiance. I recently became an American citizen, and I came here from Russia, from corrupted country, and I'm very glad to see here open public hearings. And one of the reasons I came here, that America is a country of equal opportunities. Sorry, I'm still working on my English. And I started here as a drafter because I didn't speak English at all a few years ago. And now I'm a project manager. So I felt on my own life that this is a country of equal opportunities. And I would like you to support and protect this keystone of American freedom. And to prove that America is a country of equal opportunities, and approve this project. And give it to our clients, Osborne's. And thank you, all of you, to make this country the greatest country in the world.
Well, congratulations and thank you. Okay, thank you. Now we will turn it over to the appellants.
I do have a list, and I'll try to go down it. Commissioner O'Donnell, if you remember, your comment at the end of the last meeting was that it was whatever design changes were made were to be to the satisfaction of the Planning Commission, not the appellant. I think I'd like to make a comment on the or pictures that they put up. In putting up the shaded, colored diagram against B that we showed before, it's not a fair comparison. For one thing, I put A and B in the same scale. When you saw those, they were not at the same scale, so it gave the impression that B looked more massive, possibly. Also, the amount of detail and the obscuring by the landscaping and the shadowing changes your perception. If the same were done for the other one, then you would have a fair comparison, but you're not doing apples and oranges. And their drawing also implies that there's more articulation to the roof, where you see lines that actually aren't there. As to the consensus, we still have a consensus on the changes that were agreed to there. However, throughout the whole meeting, from the very beginning, I kept asking that we address the big issues first and move on to the smaller issues that would probably take care of themselves fairly easily. That was never done. We kept going, making little decisions, and at the end, we had good decisions, but I didn't feel we had adequately addressed, to your satisfaction, this is your determination, the issues of the alley, the mass, and the articulation. Excuse me. This one, oops. This design here does at least give you a little bit of articulation of the front, because the porch roof has been shortened, so you get a little bit more feeling of depth. You know, when we started, we came up with some suggestions because it had been offered by Jeremy that his parents really wanted a French country house. So we came up with, did some research and came up with some examples. And they would pretty much dismissed as saying, well, they don't really want a French country house. We had to work within their constraints, and their constraints were no major changes, site plan, floor plan, everything. So, you know, I think there are two sides of the story. I still agree with the changes that were made, but I still say it's your decision as to whether or not they meet your direction, not mine. And so there was no change in my opinions. I made that very clear all the way along.
Thank you, Ms. Quintana. Do we have any questions for the appellant? All right, seeing none, I'll give you the same opportunity and ask the same question. Is there any bit of information that you haven't provided that would help us make our decision?
Two. I can find them. I'm going to have to do this one without looking at it because I can't find it. Oh, here it is. The question came up about the architect in the alley. The architect's comment on neighborhood context is, a rear alley serves as an access to garages for homes along the site's block front. So he did recognize that as a neighborhood pattern. Secondly, I would call your attention to consideration 6 of the considerations that you have to make for approving architectural and site analysis. And that refers to not only existing, but how it can change the character of a neighborhood in the future. And that's one of the concerns that I really have here, is that we have a neighborhood that has been pretty stable for a long, long time. There have been additions made to houses, but they've been relatively small. Now we are in a situation where we have a very large house going in across the street, The driveway was historically there, the house wasn't. I'm not saying they can't build. I think they have a right to build within the guidelines of the general plan, the design guidelines, and the FAR, tempered by the design guidelines. But it will change. It will set a precedent. Even though we don't set precedents by our decision, we look historically at what's been approved in the past. In the next few years, there will be probably an enlargement of the house at 21 Palm, since the Carol Schrager, who lives there, has passed away. There will be something new directly across the street from me on Pennsylvania, another large lot with a very small house on it, or two lots, I'm not sure which, and up the block on the corner of Wissahickon and Pennsylvania is another lot that is being split. So, it's not just this house, it applies to everything, because it's a domino effect. I mean, it really shouldn't be, but it is. If you approve one on a case-by-case basis, then it makes it easier to approve the same kind of thing for the next one. And yes, we have to approve things on a case-by-case basis, but we have to look at the bigger long-term picture as well.
Okay, thank you.
And the last thing I have to say is I know the Osbornes will be very good neighbors. This has never been about the Osbornes. It hasn't been about what I want or what the Quintanas want. It's about my belief that we should adhere to our guidelines or the general intent of the guidelines, and not each individual guideline by itself, but as they fit together as a whole.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to close the public input portion of the hearing, and before I turn it over to the commission for discussion, I think we're going to take 5 minutes. We've received some handouts and things that I have not had a chance to read yet, so we're going to take 5 minutes, and I do mean 5 minutes, and we will be back at that time to have commission discussion.
Adequately, the windows, it seems to me that the differences are professional differences between architects, professionals in the field. And while I can respect differences between people, professionals in the field on how this type of window does that or results in this kind of thing, I don't see any significant difference that would render it not responsive and consistent with the guidelines and considerations that we have that would prohibit us from moving forward with this project as presented tonight.
Great, thank you. I saw Commissioner Jensen and Commissioner O'Donnell.
That sounded like a motion. So, if I were prepared to make a motion, which I am, I have a process question, and it's very brief, and this probably goes to Mr. Martello. On the recommendations that we have in front of us on page 5 of our packet, it indicates that what we ought to do is make a motion to grant the appeal, and I wonder, why are we supposed to grant the appeal? Aren't we supposed to deny the appeal and then impose conditions? So that's what I would like to do.
I think it's a question for planning. But what I'm hearing is it's because the plans were redesigned as required by the commission.
No, the commission, well, I'm going to make a motion, and the commission can decide what to do, and then staff can decide what they're going to do with that.
I would tend to let's have a discussion, because I don't want to be a
Just
disagreement.
point of clarification, if you look at the document of August 25th, your recommendation then was to deny the appeal.
Right.
So just the hobgoblin of small minds, just for consistency, shouldn't we do the same thing? I mean, wouldn't that be what was before us?
Well, the applicant was asked to make revisions to the plans. And so we took that as, it may not be fully granting the appeal because it's not exactly what the appellant would like, but you're not approving what the DRC approved. If they did make some revisions to what was originally approved by staff at the DRC level.
So,
okay,
we don't have a problem with you.
Okay, my motion is
action.
based on what Commissioner Erickson has said. He's articulated very well that the project, the applicant has addressed the concerns of the Planning Commission at the August 25th meeting. I need to find that the project is categorically exempt pursuant to Section 15303 of the State Environmental Guidelines. It is. Find that the project is consistent with the Central Los Gatos redevelopment plan. It is. Find that the project is consistent with the considerations for approval of architecture and site applications. It is. It's also consistent with our residential design guidelines, and the applicant has also addressed the concerns of the Planning Commission. I agree with Commissioner Erickson that the differences now are differences in taste, style, and professional judgment, and it's within the discretion of the Planning Commission to accept one person's judgment over another as long as it conforms with our guidelines, which the plans in front of us do. So my motion is to deny the appeal, approve architecture and site application S1011, subject to the conditions in Exhibit 15, which do incorporate changes that have been made in response to the appeal, but doesn't mean that the appeal has been granted. So my motion is to deny the appeal.
Do we have a second? Commissioner O'Donnell?
I want to second it, but I want to ask the maker of the motion a question.
Please. We
We have discussed the possibility of wood this evening, and I understand what you just said, and I agree with it, but would you consider, the wood sounded like a very good idea, so you might want to consider.
Yes, as long as it meets the fire-resistant requirements that were indicated by staff in their comments.
So if I take that to be an inclusion, subject to that condition, my second would go to that too.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second, and I want to look over here to staff real quick to make sure that, despite what it said here, that motion will work and the intent of the motion is clear. Okay.
Yes.
Great. So do we have any other comments? We have a motion. We have the reason behind the motion stated clearly by a couple of commissioners, and a second. Do we have any additional comments or feedback? Okay, seeing none, I guess that means I'll call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes 7-0. So the project is approved.
This decision is appealable to the town council. There's a 10-day appeal period. The appeal forms are located upstairs in the town clerk's office, and there is a fee for filing an appeal.
Great, thank you. I lost my agenda. I got it. All right, so moving on. We have no new public hearings or continued other business. So under new other business, do we have a report from community development?
I have 3 items. I'll try to keep them brief. One is that we are requesting that we believe you have municipal codes, and what we're trying to do is be a little more green and cost-effective. We're finding that a lot of staff as well as commissioners and committee members do not use the municipal codes, and we are constantly providing you updates with those. So we're asking that we get those back. The codes are available online, and so you can use them, or if you have any specific questions, you can contact staff. You use the zoning code, so definitely you will keep that portion of it. We're not asking for that to come back, but if you could return the municipal codes, we would appreciate that.
And could you send out an email reminder
Yes.
for us to do that? Thank you.
Okay. The second one is just a reminder that on Monday, October 18th, we're having the general plan update committee recognition. That starts at 6 p.m. You're invited to attend. It's light refreshments. So if you're going to come to that and then go to the study session on the housing element, we do recommend that you have dinner prior to coming for the light refreshments.
We don't start the study session until 7.
Well, the council meeting starts at 7. They do have some items that they need to address, so you will... Well, and the general plan of recognition, and to acknowledge the community. And my last item, this may sound like deja vu, but we're going to look at the, when we do the rotation of the chair. I know we've discussed this before. We're going to look at it again to make it the first meeting in January. So just to let you know that that's our goal, and we'll see if we can make it happen this time.
Excuse me, related to your refreshments, I'd like to invite my fellow commissioners up for pizza at my house so that they can go into that study session with a full stomach. So I'd like to get a response from those that might like to come.
What time, Phil?
Well, you can come anytime, but I think we'll have to eat.
I'll come that afternoon.
But I would say 6 o'clock. You know, it's only going to be pizza and salad, so.
But they're having something.
That's the same time as the recognition for the...
Refreshments.
No, but it's for the, it's to...
It's to recognize the General Plan Advisory Committee, which three of us...
event.
Yeah, 3 of us
All right.
participated in that,
Can
so...
you come at 5?
Coming at 3.
5?
Do we have to help make the pizza?
No.
Oh, okay.
5 o'clock?
5 o'clock. Can I get a show of
Great.
hands of who's coming?
Can I ask that somebody send us an email on this? I don't know.
Yeah.
Just because I have a terrible memory.
I'll send an email.
Thank you, Phil.
By the way, you 3 are invited as well.
So it's a question for Mr. Martell. So if more than 4 of us show up at Phil's house for pizza, is that okay?
Provided you did not discuss business of within your subject matter jurisdiction.
So we can't talk shop.
Right.
In any event, it won't be recorded.
Okay, do we have any commission matters apart from pizza at Phil's? Okay, seeing none, meeting's adjourned. Thank you.